where the slow-moving Mekong River winds through mist-shrouded limestone karsts, and the golden spire of PHA that Luang catches the morning dun. A cold beer costs less than $2, and a full street food meal runs you just $1 to $3. People call this the cheapest country on earth. Yet the average worker's monthly income is only about $150. So cheap always depends on who is holding the wallet. This is a land of quiet, graceful people, and of women whose beauty lies in serene stillness rather than display. There are unwritten rules here that will trip up any newcomer, and a secret buried in the earth, so heavy it will change how you see the entire nation. This is real life in Laos, the cheapest country on earth, where the deepest secret is something no amount of money can buy. Start with the shape of the place. Laos is the only country in Southeast Asia with no coastline at all. It is landlocked, wrapped on every side by China, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, and Myanmar. Its capital, Vientiane, sits on the banks of the Mekong River, the Great Brown Highway that has fed this region for thousands of years. The whole country covers about 91,000 square miles, roughly the whole size of Utah. Yet only around 12 million people live in it. That makes Laos one of the countries in Asia with an economy smaller than a single mid-sized American city. For years, that low price tag earned it the label of cheapest place in the region. But hold that thought, because the real wealth of Laos was never printed on any banknote. It is also one of the youngest countries on the continent. Nearly 6 in 10 people here are under 25. So picture that. A nation the outside world tends to forget. Quietly full of young people building their lives along a river. Because it never became a backpacker headline like Thailand or Vietnam. Laos kept something its neighbors slowly sold off, its own rhythm. You feel it most in mid-April, when the whole country stops for its new year. It is called Pi Lao, and it turns into a nationwide water festival. For about 3 tons, people pour water over each other in the streets, soaking strangers and friends alike. The water is not just play. It is meant to wash away the bad luck, the sickness, and the mistakes out of the old year. So you enter the new one clean. Most people can't even point to Laos on a map. So I'm curious, what city are you watching from right now? Drop it below. And in a country this easy to overlook, the first thing every visitor notices is its people. Starting with a kind of beauty the cameras never quite catch. The beauty of Lao women is not the kind that shouts. It is soft and unhurried. Clear skin, a warm smile, a gentle way of moving that people describe as grace. What visitors come back to is the quiet strength behind it. A calm that does not need to prove anything. And once you look past the face, you find that beauty here is stitched into something much older. Take the scene, the traditional tube skirt worn by the women across the country. It is hand-woven from silk or cotton, and its patterns and colors are not random. They signal which region a woman comes from. Sometimes her status, sometimes the occasion. A fine scene is a mark of elegance, never a costume for show. And that weaving carries a weight most outsiders miss. In many Lao villages, silk weaving has been women's work since the 14th century. And a girl was once expected to master the loom before she could marry. The cloth she made was both her doughy and a public record of her skill. So here, beauty was never only about a face. It was about what your hands could make. That same care shows up the moment you are welcomed into a Lao home through a ceremony called the bocce. White cotton threads are tied around your wrists, and the belief behind it is striking. Lao tradition holds that each person carries 32 Quan small guardian spirits of the body that sometimes wander off, leaving you unbalanced. The threads call those spirits back and bind them to you, and you leave them on for at least 3 days. Weddings carry that seriousness too. Families still negotiate a bride, price in cash and gold. The celebration is held at the bride's family home, and it is common for the husband to move in with her family rather than the reverse. If that woven silk just made you see the word beautiful little differently tap-like, it tells me to keep digging past the surface. But the customs that really stop foreigners in their tracks come next, and one of them decides where your feet are allowed to point. In Laos, your feet can quietly insult a room full of people. Pointing the soles of your feet at another person or at anything sacred like a Buddha statue is a serious offense because the feet are seen as the lowest and least clean part of the body. Flip that idea over and you get the other half of the rule. The head is the most sacred part, so you never touch anyone's head. Not a friend's, and above all, not a monk's or a child's. Once you see that the body itself is ranked from sacred to lowly, the strange rules stop feeling random and start feeling like a single, careful logic. Every morning before sunrise, barefoot monks walk the streets in single file, carrying littered bowls, and ordinary people kneel to place small handfuls of sticky rice inside. It is called takbot, the morning alms-giving. Now, here is the part visitors always ask about. Why do grown men rely on strangers for breakfast? Because the monks are bound by a vow that forbids them from growing food or earning some money, so they can only receive it. That rule is not helplessness. It is the point. It ties the monks and the people together in a daily exchange where the giver earns spiritual merit and the monk receives his meal. And for many monks, that quiet bowl of rice at sunrise is the only meal they will eat all day. Rice, it turns out, is not just food here. It is identity. Lao people call themselves the children of sticky rice, eating it with their hands rolled into small balls at nearly every meal. Woven into all of this is an older Sikh belief in 5 spirits said to live in the rivers, the mountains, and the trees. That belief blends so smoothly with Buddhism that you will often find a small spirit house in the courtyard of a Buddhist temple. Once you understand these unwritten rules, you start to see the thread that ties them together. A way of living the West quietly set down and forgot. That thread has a name here, and it is only 3 words long. Bo Pen Nyang. It roughly means it's nothing or no worries, and it is close to a national reflex. Something goes wrong. A plan falls apart. A bus never comes. Bo Penang. It is not laziness. It grows out of a Buddhist acceptance that you cannot control everything. So you might as well not let it steal your peace. This is the calm that our visitors keep trying to describe when they come home. The unhurried pace that feels almost like medicine after the hustle of Western life. There is a real structure holding that calm in place. Around 2 out of 3 people in Laos are Buddhist following the Thera tradition, and it shapes almost everything. The morals, the art, the slow shape of a day. The country has nearly 5,000 gun temples. So when people say the culture feels spiritual, they are not being poetic. They are counting temples. And this is where you begin to feel the real argument of this whole country. In the West, we measure a good life mostly in what we earn and own. Here, the highest act of the holiest to people is to own almost nothing and give away what little they have. To be richer in the only currency that seems to count: peace, merit, belonging. Watch a monk accept his single meal from the hands of a stranger, and the question turns back on you. Who is actually poor here? Hold on to that calm, because later we will see what this gentle country had to survive to earn it. That calm even flavors what lands on the table, starting with a beer that took over an entire nation. Beer Lao has dominated its home market for decades, holding something like 90 to 99% amount of it brewed from local jasmine rice. And people here drink an average of around 11 gallons a person every year. Most of it, that one green bottle. The real staple, though, is that sticky rice again, and Laos eats more of it per person than anywhere else on the planet, roughly 370 lb each every year. The national dish is lb, a bright, fiery, minced meat salad. And here is a detail worth correcting. The beef version uses local, inexpensive beef, not some pricey import that outsiders assume. What makes those flavors unmistakably? Lao is PDC, a thick fermented fish sauce aged close to a year with rice, the savory backbone under nearly every dish. And to wash it down, the coffee high on the cool Balavan Plateau in the south, farmers grow more than 80% of the country's coffee, a crop the French planted a century ago. To taste all of this, you begin where most journeys do, in the quiet riverside capital on the Mekong. Vientiane may be the most low-key capital city in Southeast Asia. No soaring skylines, no gridlock, just a slow river town that happens to run a country. At its heart stands That Luang, a golden stupa rising about 148 feet, the national symbol of Laos, believed to hold a relic of the Buddha himself. Not far off is Pati, a victory monument that looks like Paris's Arc de Triomphe, reimagined in Lao style. At night, the city does not roar, it exhales. Along the Mekong, a riverside night market lights up with grilled skewers, cold beer, and handmade crafts. Beer gardens fill as the sun drops behind Thailand on the far bank, and friends crowd around karaoke machines, singing over crates of beer Lao. Nothing here tries to be Bangkok. This is the native of a country that lives slowly. A capital where the wildest night out is a beer garden and a karaoke machine. Could you trade your city's noise for that? One word, yes or no. Tourism is booming again. Laos welcomed more than 5 million visitors in a recent year, bringing in over $1 billion. But tucked into a quiet, abandoned street in Vieng sits a small, free museum called the Cope Center, filled with prosthetic limbs, fragments of metal, and the recorded voices of survivors. It is the gentlest possible warning of what is coming. Because to understand Laos fully, you have to look up at that peaceful sky and remember what once fell out of it. But first, follow the Mekong upstream to the soul of the country. Luang Prabang was the royal capital until 1975, and it has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1995. And the moment you arrive, you understand why. This is a town that time set gently aside. Golden temple roofs sit beside faded French colonial shophouses. Saffron robes drift past cafes, and almost none of it has been torn down. That blend of Lao and colonial architecture, preserved almost whole, is rare anywhere in Southeast Asia. Mornings belong to the almsgiving. Hundreds of monks flowing through the streets at once. Climb Mount Puzi for sunset over the rivers. And just outside the city, the Kangi Falls drop through pools of an unreal turquoise blue. Little wonder, visitors keep saying one night was never enough. The town now draws well over 2 million people a year. But that popularity, UNESCO has warned that the crush of tourism, together with a new dam planned on the Mekong nearby, could threaten the very qualities that make the place special. It is the paradox of the modern country in miniature. The world is finally discovering Laos, and in the discovering, it risks wearing away the stillness people came to find. A few hours south sits a town whose recent past was far wilder and darker. For a while, Vieng was infamous. Backpackers came to float down the river on inner tubes, stopping at riverside bars for buckets of cheap liquor, and it spun out of control. In a single year, around 27 travelers died on that river. In late 2012, the government shut the river bars down and forced the town to reinvent itself. Today, it has come back as an adventure, an eco-destination. All kayaking, rock climbing, and hot air balloons drifting over dramatic limestone karst. But one danger has not gone away, and it has to be said plainly. In November of 2024, 6 travelers died in Vientiane from methanol poisoning after drinking tainted spirits. 2 teenage girls from Australia, 2 women from Denmark, 1 from Britain, and 1 American. Methanol is sometimes used to stretch cheap homemade alcohol, and it can blind or kill. The lesson for any traveler is serious. Be very careful with cheap spirits and unlabeled bottles here. But to understand Laos fully, you have to look up at that quiet sky and remember what once fell from it. Between 1964 and 1973, more than 2 million tons of bombs were dropped on this small, landlocked country across roughly 580,000 bombing missions. Do the math, and it lands like a stone. That is 1 plane load of bombs falling somewhere in Laos every 8 minutes around the clock for 9 straight years. It made Laos the most heavily bombed country in history per person. More bombs than fell on Germany and Japan combined during all of the Second World War. And for decades, most of the world had no idea. Clearance groups like MAG and UXO, Laos still work the ground by hand, meter by meter, while the Cope Center fits survivors with new limbs. There is a newer wound on top of the old one. In early 2025, a sore freeze on American foreign aid halted much of the clearance work, and around 4,000 trained and bomb removal specialists were told to stop. And in the months after, there were more deaths, including a 15-year-old girl. The United States has long been the largest funder of that clearance. Half a century after the last plane left, the ground is still deciding who gets to grow old. The people here did something astonishing with the metal that was meant to destroy them. They turned it into life. Old bomb casings became flower planters and cooking pots. Cluster shells were beaten into spoons and hung as temple bells. Whole houses stand today on stilts made from diffused American bombs. A nation took the single heaviest thing ever dropped on it and made it hold up a home. That is the real secret of Laos, and no amount of money could ever buy it. Right in the middle of that same haunted region sits a mystery from long before the war. The Plain of Jars. Scattered across the hills of Siangkwang are more than 2,000 giant stone jars, some weighing as much as 14 tons, carved between 500 BC and 200 AD. Archaeologists believe they were used in ancient burial rites, but no one is certain how a people 30,000 years ago moved stone vessels that heavy. After everything Laos went through, its people chose peace over bitterness. So, let me ask you something real. Does modern life actually make us richer or just busier? Tell me below. After a wait like that, it helps to step back into the ordinary rules of the place. And Laos has a few that surprise outsiders. The most striking of them about romance. It is against the law for a foreigner to have a sexual or live-in relationship with an unmarried Laos citizen. Break it, and the penalties run from fines of $500 to $5,000 to possible jail, time or deportation, and hotels are required to report unmarried couples of different nationalities. It sounds extreme to Western ears, but it comes from a strong cultural instinct to protect Lao families from being treated casually. Away from the temples, roughly 70% of Laos is still covered in forest, one of the greenest countries in Asia. Down in the far south, where the Mekong swells to several miles wide, the river shatters into a maze of islets known as the 4,000 Islands. There is a hard truth to note there. The rare Irrawaddy river dolphins that once lived in these waters are now gone from Laos, the last one having died in early 2022, though a few survive across the border in Cambodia. Head into the center of the country, and the land itself opens up. Konglor Cave is a limestone tunnel nearly 5 meters long, with a ceiling soaring up to 300 feet, and you travel through it by longtail boat, gliding through the dark heart of a mountain on an underground river. Near Luang Prabang, the turquoise tears of Quang Sea Falls hide a gentler surprise. A sanctuary that has rescued around 25 Asiatic black bears from the illegal bile trade. But this green is not guaranteed. In a single recent year, Laos lost more than 350,000 hectares of forest, nearly 2/3 of it inside protected areas driven by logging, plantations, and dams, close to 3 times the rate of neighboring Cambodia. So the wilderness that defines this country is also quietly shrinking. And a big part of the reason begins with a railroad from the north. In December of 2021, a gleaming high-speed railway opened, running from the Chinese border down to Vientiane and on into China's Kunming. For a country where the old roads could turn a short trip into a full day, it felt like the future arriving overnight. But that future came with a bomb price tag that should make you pause. The railway cost around $6 billion, close to 1/3 of the entire national economy, most of it financed by Chinese loans. That is the quiet tension running under modern Laos. Its public debt has climbed to around or above the size of its whole economy, and China holds roughly half of what it owes abroad, which has the International Monetary Fund sounding steady alarms. And here is a telling detail about how change actually arrives. Laos got its first Starbucks in 2022 in a Vientiane mall. Yet to this day, the entire country has no McDonald's no KFC, and no Burger King. The global brands are creeping in, but slowly at the country's own pace. That railway hints at a bigger ambition, though, because Laos wants to power half of Southeast Asia. For a nation with no coastline and little heavy industry, Laos found an unlicensed source of wealth flowing right through it. Water. All those mountains and rivers can be dammed for electricity. And the country has staked its future on becoming what it proudly calls the battery of Southeast Asia. It now runs more than 70 dams and sells that power to Thailand, Vietnam, China, and Cambodia. In a recent year, it exported nearly 41 terawatt-hours of electricity, while importing almost none. But the battery has a crack in it. In the dry season, when the rivers run low, Laos sometimes has to burn coal to avoid buying power back from Thailand. And the debt taken on to build those dams has helped push electricity costs up for ordinary Lao families. So here is a country that lights up its neighbors' cities while some of its own people struggle with their power bills. Rich in what it can give away, stretched thin behind the dams and the railways, though, lives an older Laos. Dozens of peoples and rockets aimed at the sky. Laos is not one people, but many. The government officially recognizes 49 ethnic groups, with estimates of well over 200 smaller subgroups, making it one of the most diverse patches of land in Asia. The Khmer make up about 11% of the population. The M, around 9, each with their own language, dress, and beliefs. And some of those beliefs produce astonishing sights. Every year before the rains, villagers hold the Rocket Festival, firing homemade bamboo rockets packed with gunpowder into the sky. A loud, joyful plea to the rain god for a good wet season. Miss and the maker sometimes gets thrown in the mud for his trouble. Now, about that word, cheapest. Here is what real life actually costs. You can live comfortably in Vientiane on roughly $600 to $1,000 a month, rent included. A street meal is $1 throughs, and that beer stays under $2. By the standard of a Western paycheck, it is inexpensive, but hold it against a local paycheck and the picture flips. The average worker here earns only about $156 a month. Even at tourist level, Laos is not always cheaper than Thailand, with foreigners sometimes charged double the local price. Cheap, it turns out, is a question of whose life you are measuring. And here the story circles all the way back to America. There are roughly 360,000 Americans today, one of the larger Asian communities in the country. Most of them in California, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, with St. Paul the biggest Hmong city in the nation. They are here because the Hmong were the forgotten allies of that secret war. And when it ended in 1975, tens of thousands had to flee for their lives. 360,000 people carrying this story. If it is new to you, subscribe, because the next country I dig into hides history just like this one. But those low prices hide a storm, because the money itself is losing value fast. Behind the bargain prices, Laos has been living through a currency crisis. The kip has been sinking hard, from around 9,000 to the dollar in 2020, to more than 21,000 a few years later, losing over half its value. While inflation peaked above 40%, among the highest in Asia, for a traveler with dollars, everything just looks cheap. For a Lao family paid in kip, the price of rice and fuel and Vafhajan medicine keeps climbing while the paycheck stands still. That pressure pushes people out, something like 230,000 Lao workers have crossed into Thailand for jobs, chasing wages their own economy cannot, pay. It is the hard edge behind the low prices. The same cost of living that charms a visitor can quietly hollow out a village. There is a fragile light, though. By 2025, inflation had eased back into single digits, and officials declared the worst over. And through all of it, the thing that does not break is the thing we started with. The storms come and go, the bombs, the debt, the falling money, and the quiet holes. Boring young, it's nothing. We will be all right. So, is Laos really the cheapest country on earth? Maybe by the numbers, but that was never the real story. The truth of this place is that it is poor in the one thing we spend our whole lives chasing, and quietly rich in the things we lose while chasing it. Stillness, belonging, the grace to lose everything and not lose your peace. It is a country that was handed the heaviest metal in human history and turned it into flower pots and homes. Money cannot buy almost anything here. It cannot buy the one thing that makes this country unforgettable. And if that idea stays with you, the next country, say, worth sitting with might be a neighbor, cut from the same cloth. Somewhere like Vietnam, just as poor on paper, just as quietly rich